Okay? So take that stuff out of yours. Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the In the Huddle podcast. We are live here in stereo dog sound. Hopefully my son Mateo will be tending to our dogs here. I am Jason Canfora. I have the pleasure and honor, as always, to be joined by Brian Baldinger, the best breakdown guy in the biz. Our buddy Carl Dukes, who is with us most weeks, is still out of town and hope he's having a great vacation. But Baldy and I are back as we are every week, and you can find us right here on Twitter. We're live a lot. You can find us on our YouTube channel. You can listen to us on the Odyssey app, wherever you get your podcast. Please subscribe. But we're here every week in some shape or form, at least two of the three of us. And this week we're talking AFC West and NFC West. And Baldy, you kind of start at the top, right? I mean, if we're going to break down these two divisions, we might as well start with the team that has proven to be the best in football, the Kansas City Chiefs, and one that is starting to creep into New England Patriots territory.
Well, I mean, you win 3 out of 4 Super Bowls. It's a dynasty on any level. It's a dynasty in the NFL. I mean, they just went back-to-back for the first time since the Patriots did it 20 years ago. And so when you perform like that, especially in the postseason, you get those kind of monikers attached to you, and rightfully so. And I'm sure that every single person, as they get ready to head out to St. Joseph, Missouri here in another month, that they're thinking about a three-peat and are focused on doing it. And they've got a target on the back like they did last year. Things didn't go they weren't going swimmingly well halfway through the season, but this is a team that has proven that they can figure things out as the season goes on, even if they're stacking some losses or losing some teams you don't think they should lose to. They lost on Christmas Day to the Las Vegas Raiders. They didn't look very good. They get to January and they put it all together. So they just have the coaching staff. And I'll be honest with you. I know you're in Baltimore, and Baltimore, Jason, finished the season the number 1 ranked defense in football, and they pitched the shutout in Kansas City in the second half of that AFC Championship game. But I thought all along the best defense in football was Kansas City. They finished number 2, but you watch them in the postseason and what they did to the Ravens, what they did in the second half to the 49ers in the Super Bowl. That team has the ability defensively to rise up like they have the last 2 years and really put the opposing offense in lockdown. And I don't think they've gotten any worse. I know they've lost Willie Gay and they lost L'Jarius Sneed, but the reinforcements are there on that side of the ball right now.
Well, and Baldy, that's why I almost feel like they're in part more dangerous this year, because last year wasn't some magic carpet ride where everything fell their way, right? And there was no adversity, and it just was like the football gods gave them the perfect scenarios. Like they had to reinvent themselves on the fly. They had to lean even more into the run game. They had to let the defense become the star, right? And I mean, and there were points in time in the middle of the season where it's like, what's wrong with Kelsey and Mahomes, right? What's wrong with the Chiefs' red zone offense? We spent a lot of time talking about that last year, yet they still were the last team standing. So it's like they could beat you with the defense and with the run game, right? And with Mahomes just being the point guard. But we also know in their back pocket any given week, if Andy Reid wants to cut loose and Mahomes wants to throw it 55 times and run it, 8 times, like, good luck, you know what I mean? Good luck stopping them that way, too. Like, I almost feel like they're better for what they went through last year. And, I mean, maybe even more dangerous this year? I mean, am I crazy?
I remember this, Jason. I remember I've known Andy Reid since his opening press conference when he came to Philadelphia, 1999. And I met him that day. So I've known him for 25 years. And I'm basically for 24 and a half years, anytime you talked about an Andy Reid coach team, you almost always went to the offense first. I remember on a podcast I did with him, probably, in December at some point. And I said, Andy, for the first time since I've known you, 25 years, I'm more excited about your defense than your offense. And they did. They carried them. And, credit to the front office and how they have drafted, to Steve Spagnuolo and how he has developed, along with his staff, I mean, it's been really, really good. And so I do think that, they did get their adversity. They had their drops. They had their penalties. They had, terrible losses up in Green Bay. And maybe the calls didn't go right. Man, that looked like a good football team when they got to January. And so what they did to the Ravens in Baltimore, I didn't think that they would be able to do, to jump out to that lead and defend the goal line like they did. And, when they had to, and defend Lamar in the run game. And you can say, well, the Ravens, Ravens did what they did. The Chiefs came and they took it from them. And I really thought it was the Ravens' day. And so here they are. And, for the most part, I feel like there's quite a few guys in that team that are indispensable, like Chris Jones and Patrick Mahomes and, Travis Kelce and Creed Humphrey. And, those guys, by and large, knock on wood, those guys stay healthy, Jason. They line up and play every weekend. That's the foundation to this team. They have a bunch of really great, healthy players that show up every week.
Well, Baldy, look, we're not going to BS people. There's a lot of questions about a lot of teams in this division, and there's probably going to be a couple of teams in this division that we don't spend as much time talking about as some others because they got a long way to go. But the LA Chargers, to me, are one of the more intriguing teams in this league this year. We've seen the Harbaugh effect come in, and it's swift, right? It's a punch to the jaw, and it's a shock to the system. And next thing you know, a team like San Francisco that had been going nowhere forever is all of a sudden a contender. Some people are freaking out about who the receivers are. I think they'll be just fine. I think they're going to play a version of bully ball that you have not seen from a Chargers team in a long, long time, right? Maybe not since Bobby Ross was there. Baldy, I just think they're going to be formidable. I think they have a legitimate playoff pedigree. They got to tune some things up defensively, but I think the way they're going to run the ball is going to put that defense in positions to succeed in ways that it just hasn't been the case there in a long time.
It's interesting. I as you were talking, Jason, I just had another great coach, just pop into my head. Like everywhere Bill Parcells went, he won. Everywhere. Yeah. And it was, they went to the playoffs with Quincy Carter at quarterback. I mean, they went to the playoffs with the Jets. They won playoff games with the Jets. This is what Harbaugh is. And so I don't know how, they're easily one of my top three most going to be watched teams this year.
Intriguing, yeah.
The track record is just so strong, Jason. What he did in San Francisco, and as soon as he got there, I mean, they became a running team. Frank Gore had his best season in Harbaugh's first year. They drafted Kendall Hunter, and they drafted Colin Kaepernick, and they ran the ball. And the one thing that you could count on with this Chargers team, no matter who was the coach over basically the last 10 years, is they were going to get injured, and they weren't going to tackle, and they weren't going to be good in big games. And I mean, that's just a fact. And I would think the way that Harbaugh builds these calluses and implants these, this positivity in his players and how he unites a team. I mean, it's very, very unique. Only a few coaches, I feel, can really make a dramatic, instant effect. And I expect this from Harbaugh this year. I expect this team to look totally different than what we are used to seeing them. And we always think they have a talented roster. We always believe that. And so you can say, okay, Keenan Allen, Michael Williams, fine. They're going to have stable running backs. They went out and got the right tackle, Joe Alt. They're going to put a good offensive line together. They're going to be tough. There's going to be a bunch of tight ends on the field. There's going to be a fullback. I mean, just some of the state, and they're going to be better defensively than what we're used to seeing.
Yeah, they're going to bully you. I think their days of being bullied are over, and that I just think that's a playoff team for me. We both championed what Antonio Pierce did with the Raiders last year under extremely adverse circumstances from the roster, right? The quarterback, the hand he was dealt, taking over when he did, some of the lingering resentment in that locker room for Josh McDaniels. He obviously put enough on film and meeting with the owner and just the whole building to keep that job as well. He should have. But man, Baldy, I think the task is kind of even harder this year because where are they at the quarterback position? Where are they from a talent perspective? I don't know, Baldy. Like I just, is there a whole lot of there with the Vegas Raiders?
They thought Gardner Minshew is, put him in there and compete with Aiden O'Connell. I don't think anybody that is, a football fan, a Raider Nation, honorary member can say that quarterback stable that they have right now is what you need in order to go compete for a playoff spot. It just doesn't look like it. And so, it was just bizarre, what they did in the draft. I mean, they had a screaming need for right tackle, screaming need. Yeah. I know Brock Bowers is a talented player, but they just drafted a good tight end last year. Mm-hmm. Kind of hard to, but, I would have gone offensive tackle or figured out the quarterback position right there. I think defensively, they have a chance to be pretty good. They finished last year, since Antonio Pierce took over, they gave up the fewest points in the league. They had some weak opponents up there, but they did. They finished 9th in the league in defense. They kept Patrick Graham, who's a really good coach, Rob Leonard, Rob Ryan. They kept their staff, and they added to it. And I feel like the addition of Jack Jones last year, Spillane, Christian Wilkins in free agency, I think defensively they're going to be pretty good. And I'm going to see a bunch of those guys this weekend in Las Vegas. I'm heading out there for the SAC Summit being put on by Max Crosby and Von Miller. It's going to be pretty good. They're going to have a bunch of their pass rushers there, including Tyree Wilson, who really made a big leap as the season went on last year. I think he's going to be a good player. But I just think offensively, I mean, the running game right now, the offensive line, the quarterbacks, like you can draw serious question marks about those key positions going into the season.
Yeah, we'll see how transcendent that defense is. I think the other team, man, gets to 21, let alone 24. I think they're in a little bit of trouble. Where are we on the Denver Broncos, Baldy? I'm not sure that they're still not headed in reverse before they eventually, put the pedal to the metal with Sean Payton and make their real push, right? We've seen it take some time with some teams, right? Like the Cleveland Browns teardown took a while before they started moving forward with Stefanski. The Houston Texans, I mean, seemingly they were stuck in rebuild mode forever, right? Until they weren't, until they got the quarterback. Remains to be seen if Sean Payton got the quarterback this year or not. I'm sure they're going to want to find out about Bo Nix ASAP. But we watched them go into Buffalo right in the middle of last year and beat the Bills and then make a little bit of a wild card push. I don't think that's them anymore. Like, I don't think Sean Payton's got to worry this year about, am I better than I thought I was at the trade deadline? Like,
they were in a playoff push.
Clearly a long-term rebuild.
They were in a playoff push until they lost to basically a glorified expansion team to the Patriots at home.
Yeah.
And that's when Sean Payton pulled the plug on Russell Wilson and said, okay, enough. And so I don't know if Bo Nix, I mean, I would imagine Bo Nix is probably going to be the starter. I imagine. Mm-hmm. You might as well start playing him. It's not a very good roster around him. It's not Caleb Williams walking into Chicago. I don't even know if it's as good as Jaden Daniels going into Washington right now. There's some real question marks about just the overall talent on this team right now. And so, tight end receivers look a little questionable. The quarterback sometimes can make up for it, but you're going to ask a rookie quarterback to do what, it's silly to think, okay, Drew Brees can make anybody look good out there and find the open receiver and get it to him. I don't know. I feel like it's Sean Payton and everything else. Like, I don't know what the strength of this team is right now. Mm-hmm. And then you're going to try to break in a rookie quarterback with that. I feel a little bit like you, like they might have to take another step back in order to get this thing going forward. It is interesting, though, that we started with Kansas City and all these teams we just talked about, the Chargers, the Raiders, the Broncos, all they keep doing is changing. While the Chiefs just keep dominating the division. And we saw the same thing. We saw, in fact, you started the whole show today talking about the Patriots. Like, this is what we saw in the AFC East for 2 decades, was just a constant turnstile of 3 other teams changing coaches, general managers, quarterbacks, trying to catch the Patriots. And that's where these other 3 teams are trying to catch the Chiefs. Who's the most stable team? The Chiefs. Who doesn't have a glaring weakness? The Chiefs.
Yeah.
Who, they have all these things in place. And so that's what these other 3 teams are trying to do. Get the pieces in place where you can truly compete, year in, year out. And all 3 of these teams are in the beginning stages of that.
Baldy, before we go to the NFC, if I told you we're going to start doing draft preview shows, 9 months from now or whatever, and one of the primary topics is, will Sean Payton draft another quarterback? Like, I think Bo Nix could look like okay. Like, he could look like a guy who could play in the league. But I think this team's going to be so bad, and he's going to be sitting with his maybe pick of the litter of quarterbacks. And we've seen teams go back-to-back high first-round picks with quarterbacks before. Like, I kind of already feel like that might be where this one's heading because there's going to be so little around Bo Nix, even if he kind of looks the part.
Yeah, it's a possibility, Jason. I mean, I don't want to wish anything bad on Bo, and I'm curious, honestly. Like, there's Jarrett Stidham on the roster, and Zach Wilson. I mean, I think Bo Nix is a better prospect than those guys at this point. But maybe Sean just says this isn't good enough. That our team around Bo Nix isn't good enough to put him out there right now. I don't want to, I don't want this kid to get damaged early. The way we saw. So I don't know. They might very well be. I don't know what the quarterback stock looks like coming out next year. I thought, this year we knew Caleb and Drake were, and Jaden. We didn't know Jaden was going to win the Heisman and do what he did. So guys could come out, these transfers, and they could put a great year together. I don't know who's going to be out there right now, but they might very well be. It might just be that just because you got to get that position right, no matter what you have to do. And let's face it. Russell Wilson was a disaster in Denver. From the cap standpoint and just the friction and, you're trying to get off on the right foot and, all the things that got said, things that were the way that it finished. I mean, it was an ugly first year for Sean Payton. And so sometimes it's addition by subtraction. And I'm sure that's how he looks at it right now. And they had to take the cap hit. They couldn't do much in free agency. They didn't really add much in the draft. I mean, they're just a little hamstrung right now. When you look at the embarrassment of riches that the Chiefs can go get Hollywood Brown, and they can make all these picks, and they can get themselves a left tackle. They can do all these things, and still keep their great players all happy, all unified, all paid. They're just not anywhere near that position right now.
Road in Boulder, Colorado, I think Sean Payton might fall in love with. This is the In the Huddle podcast. Our buddy Carl Dukes put him up, is let's just say on assignment. So it's Jason Lockenfor and Brian Baldinger as we continue to break down some of these NFL divisions. And again, today we AFC West, NFC West we'll get to in a second. But please subscribe, listen to us on the Odyssey app, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. You can also check us out on our YouTube channel or right here on, I refuse to call it the letter, so I'm just going to say Twitter, right here on Twitter as well. All right, Baldy, let's turn to the other conference, and we might as well start with the team that lost to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. A lot of drama in San Francisco, hand-wringing about what Brock Purdy is going to cost a few months from now when he's eligible for an extension. This Brandon Ayuk situation is clearly not going away anytime soon. I don't know, Baldy. Like last year, I looked at them and said, we watched them down the stretch. We watched them in the playoffs. I said, boy, I don't love the right side of their offensive line at all. And are they getting enough pass rush? And if it's just Bosa, is that going to be good enough? I kind of look at them right now, and I have some of the same questions.
They're a talented roster, Jason. They're talented. I mean, are they all pro across the board? They're not. I thought the defensive line. I talked to Nick Bosa last week or the week before, and he really thought last year, Jason. Last year at this time he was a complete holdout. He wasn't coming to camp. Not without a contract, and so he got signed on the Friday before their opener against Pittsburgh. And, he came out and he got 3 sacks in the opener. He thought, okay, here's your defensive player of the year again. And then it really didn't go great after that. And he didn't get much help. I didn't think, Cleveland Farrell picking up Chase Young. I didn't think Eric Armstead had a great year.
Mm-hmm.
And so they weren't a good front. They weren't a dominant defensive front. And Nick wasn't. He said missing the offseason training camp hurt him. He needed to work with Javon Hargrave, the big free agent signing, who didn't play great last year.
No.
So I feel like, okay, I thought that because the success they've had with their defensive front, whether it was Robert Saleh, D'Amico Ryans coming in, like all the guys that went through there, that they would, again, just be this defense that was the front four dominant. And they weren't dominant. And so they didn't blitz particularly well. They didn't disguise blitzes. And so they made a change at coordinator. Nick Sorensen comes in. And we'll see what he does. He was on the staff last year, so he's familiar with the town. But I thought Leonard Floyd is an upgrade on the opposite end, opposite Nick. I think bringing in, guys like Malik Collins, who's been a steady player in this business. So I think depth-wise they're better. They're going to get back Tano Honafanga, who was a Pro Bowl player the year before, who got hurt halfway through the season last year. They should still be very good defensively. And I think the defensive front will be better. The Brandon Ayuk thing is a little bizarre. I thought before the draft there wasn't a chance that the 49ers would not resign him. But if you draft Ricky Pearsall in the first round, and he's a good player. In fact, he kind of reminds you a little bit of Ayuk. It's kind of, don't you draft in the first round of the position where you're going to supplant that position with the player?
Yes.
Like, I think they would love to have Brandon back for another year. But, we just saw the price tag of these receivers are through the roof. Like, there's no reason. And I love Brandon Ayuk. He's their best receiver. But if you put Ricky Pearsall in his place to let him just grow into the job right now, there's still going to be a good offense. It's still going to go through McCaffrey. I think Purdy's still going to make great decisions with the football. Kittle's still going to get his. Debo's still going to be that guy. Mm-hmm. So I just feel like as much as John Lynch says, we want him. Mm-hmm. We want Brandon Ayuk. Do they really want it? Because
Baldy, they want him at their price. They want him at their price. It's pretty clear. Right. They want him at their price, and the market has exploded. And
yeah. So I don't know, but regardless, they're still going to be a good football team. They drafted an offensive lineman in the first round. Pooney, maybe the right guard position wasn't particularly strong last year. That should help. I think. So I think, look, it's a good roster. We know what Kyle Shanahan has to do on his resume in order to be in the upper echelon of some of these other guys that are out there, like a McVay. He got his. Once you get one, you can never take, like Mike Holmgren said when he got his, you can never take it away. It's always there. And so he's been knocking on the door for a long time. They're an elite organization. You talk to the players that play there. They're just one of the few places that said, okay, we draft players, we identify players, we reward players. Or we go out and trade for players and they produce, we reward them. And there's just, this is an organization-driven business. There's 8 great organizations right now. There's 8 that are trying to figure it out. And there's a bunch that are just going to keep turning things over. And that's just where this whole business has always been. And the 49ers are right up there at the top of the food chain.
Baldy, I'm really bullish on the LA Rams. And they had a renaissance really during their bye week, right? And they kind of figured some things out. They got healthier up front. They, like a lot of teams, realize, hey, this Kyron Williams kid, man, like we could run a whole lot more through him, and that's going to set up, us to have even more joy in the passing game. You mentioned Sean McVay and his resume. from coming out of that week 10 bye week through week 17. Remember, week 18, a lot of people took some time off. The NFL leaders in touchdown passes weeks 11 through 17 with 16 were Matthew Stafford and Jordan Love. I know they lost Aaron Donald, but man, the no-name defense and the way those guys came together, they won't have Raheem Morris running the show anymore, and that's a big loss. And Sean McVay would be the first one to tell you that. But I kind of feel like this group can pick up where they left off last year, Baldy, even without Aaron Donald. Are you with me?
Oh yeah, no, I love the Rams. I mean, you saw them firsthand, probably like week 15 or 16 when the Rams went to Baltimore. One of the great games.
Should have won the game. Yeah, should have won the game.
It looked like a playoff game, honestly. Two teams playing at a very high level, and the Rams went. There was 31-31. I mean, they're right there in Baltimore, looking like a team that could make a deep playoff run, and they had some success. And couple things. One, you always have to fix your offensive line. I don't care who's your quarterback, who's your running back. You have to get the offensive line fixed. They did that last year. They drafted Steve Avila to play left guard last year. He's now their center. I think he's an upgraded center. They put Jonah Jackson in there at left guard. Like, they're going to be strong. You're going to get Cooper Kupp healthy to go with Nakua. Kyron Williams is just a beast. And then, by the way, here comes Blake Corum. Like, Les Snead's doing a fantastic job restocking. And then, yes, Aaron Donald is gone, and Aaron Donald is irreplaceable. But every team eventually has to lose a player. If you're lucky enough to get a player like Aaron Donald, you're going to lose a player like that. And I think just the fact that he was there last year helping Kobe Turner, helping Byron Young, helping Bobby Brown, like some of these young defensive linemen. And then you add Jared Verse, their first-round pick in 8 years, and go get his partner in crime right next to him, Braden Fisk. Like, you look at the youth on their defensive front, I don't think anybody believes that Braden Fisk isn't going to be a good player, that Jared Verse isn't going to be a good defensive end in this business. And so you just look at the pieces, and you look at how – because I've always said this, Jason, I've always said it's harder to replace great coaches than it is great players. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the drain of coaches out of Sean McVay's system, it seems like almost every coach that gets hired right now comes from Sean McVay's system.
Oh, yeah.
Head coaches, coordinators across the league, Shane Waldron, whatever it is, Dave Canales, they're all coming out of this system. And anybody that spends any time around Sean McVay kind of sees it. Like, his command of everything is just unique. It's just a unique thing. And I think the youth on this team, I'm sure when he won a Super Bowl and he got married, that he was thinking about, you know what, I'm going to get out of this business.
Sure.
And I'm just going to get a TV job and be a nice father and family man. But I think this whole thing has really rejuvenated him right now. And the fact that Stafford, you give him a run game and some protection, I don't know how long he can go. Like, it looks like he can still whistle the ball as well as anybody and compete as well as anybody right now.
Could the Rams win the NFC West?
Yeah, I mean, I think they compete really well with San Francisco. Mm-hmm. San Francisco used to beat them up, physically beat them up, and they owned them for a while. But I don't believe that's the Rams anymore. They're not a finesse team. Like, once Kyron Williams got healthy and got in there, they can run the ball as well as anybody. And so they'll balance things up on that side of the ball. And I think defensively, they're not going to get pushed around at all.
Well, the rest of the division obviously has either made a significant front office or coaching change this year or the previous year. I guess we'll go to Seattle next, since they've had more of a playoff pedigree under Pete Carroll. They seem to have taken a very measured approach to resetting their organization. And despite, being a playoff team or a playoff-ish team with Geno at quarterback, I don't know. I kind of like Sam Howell. I'm interested to see how that plays out. And just, Baldy, the fact that they didn't run in there and try to patch a bunch of holes with free agents, I wonder if they are playing the long game a little bit given that they're only a few months removed from that big shadow that Pete Carroll cast. Like, Pete Carroll's like everybody's favorite grandpa, but like, don't get it twisted. That was Pete Carroll's building in every way, shape, or form.
Oh, and him and John Schneider were joined at the hip. I mean, they saw it the same way and how to build a team. But they were in a playoff hunt last year, and then the Pittsburgh Steelers went up there week 17, and they just handed it to them. And I just think, the owners and saying like this, we've got to rebuild this thing. Defensively, that was not a good team. That was always Pete Carroll's thing.
Yes.
And they were patching it up with Bobby Wagner and different guys. They had to fix it. I mean, give Mike Macdonald a chance here to put this thing together. If you look at just their skill positions, you look at DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. And with the two young running backs and an offense line that they have drafted over the last 3 years, this could be if the quarterback position, Geno, Sam, whatever, plays reasonably well, takes care of the ball, this offense could be really good. So I'm excited because I saw how they did it in Baltimore with Mike Macdonald and what they did, and I think this is going to be the style of defense that's going to kind of travel through the league in a lot of ways. Zone principles, matchup zone principles, make the quarterbacks hold the ball until the ball snapped to get any sort of read on what they're doing and where they're going. I'm anxious to see if Mike can make a big difference defensively, because if he can, and what he does there, then I think Seattle can compete, because I think offensively they have a chance to be pretty good.
You mentioned that Pittsburgh game. I mean, in that Pittsburgh game, it looked like you could have got Jerome Bettis out of retirement, and he might have gone for $150 against them. Like, can they fix that run defense overnight? Because we just talked about Shanahan and McVay, right? We know what they would do against that team if they had to face them right now. Like, can they get pedestrian enough, right? Like, can they even get to like slightly worse than league average against the run overnight to give themselves a fighting chance?
Well, they gutted the interior of this defense. I mean, Bobby Wagner, Jordan Brooks gone. Quandre Diggs, Jamal Adams gone. They gutted it, and so Pete's big thing, forever was we're gonna take away the middle of the field. You're not gonna beat us. That's exactly where San Francisco wants to attack you, in the middle of the field, and run right between the tackles, right at you. And that's what Pittsburgh did to them. And so it's got to be done in a different way. They're not going to have Roquan Smith, and Patrick Queen the way Mike did. They're not going to have, the safeties, Marcus Williams and Geno Stone, the guys that they had. They're not going to have those type of players. So you got to play with what you got. They got, new safeties, new inside linebackers right now, pretty much the same defensive front. So it's going to be like, let's see how they coach these guys up. Let's see if Boye Mafe can really develop into a double-digit sack, phenom off the edge, and Darrell Taylor and some of the other guys they have. Like, we need these guys to step up, because I think if you look at Devin Witherspoon, like, I think he's not Kyle Hamilton because he doesn't have his length, but he can cover, he can tackle, he can match up. Like, he is a star player, and I'm anxious to see how Mike Macdonald uses him. The only question about Devin, honestly, is the way that he plays. Can a guy that size stay healthy long term if you play as aggressively and recklessly as he plays?
Baldy, we will finish it up here with the Arizona Cardinals. I guess personally, I'm not exactly sure what to make of them. They clearly made some strides in Jonathan Gannon's first year. They shocked me the first quarter of the season. They were like the little engine that could. I'm like, wow, maybe these guys are better than I thought. They're at least putting up more of a fight than I thought. And then I felt like the talent imbalance hit, and there was a period of time where it's like, oh, they are who I thought they were. And then I can remember them playing the Texans and like playing the Steelers and being like, hey, you know what? Now Kyler's back, and maybe they are punching above their weight class again. Ultimately, there's a long way to go. Where are you on them? Can they be more consistently like competitive at least across 17 games? And do you think they're totally sold on Kyler?
I think it's wait and see on Kyler. I think,
Yeah.
I mean, he played the second half of the season last year. He played well. He wasn't, the best quarterback in the division by far, but he played well. I like to see him with an off season and, with a chance to work with Marvin Harrison Jr. There wasn't a lot to throw to last year. Trey McBride was their guy, which is fine. They ran the ball. James Conner had a renaissance. The offensive line looked pretty good. They're going to move Paris Johnson from right tackle to left tackle. I think he'll be fine doing it. He played every snap last year for him. I think they've been drafting well. You look at Paris Johnson and BJ Ojolari. It looks like the corner they drafted last year. Then you look at Darius Robinson and Max Melton and drafted him this year. I mean, Monty Ossenfort is putting this thing together piece by piece. The one thing you mentioned you saw them against Baltimore. They're very competitive against Baltimore for a while. They went to Philadelphia. They went to Pittsburgh and won. They beat the Cowboys soundly. They flashed. But I feel like they're putting this thing together slowly. This thing I know about Jonathan Gannon, however he did it, because there was a lot of players that didn't want to be there, Jason.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of guys that wanted out of that building, and they didn't want to be a part of the Cardinals. But I will say this. They played hard for Jonathan Gannon. However he did it, they played hard. They played the game the right way. They played the game with enthusiasm. They were ready to play. They didn't get blown out of games with a roster that wasn't very good last year and quarterbacks being played off the street and all that kind of stuff. So I expect this team to become much more competitive this year. And I don't know what that means. Does that mean 6 wins, 7 wins? I don't know. But to answer your first question is Kyler the answer? Well, they didn't draft Kyler. We know what that means when an organization doesn't draft your quarterback regardless of the contract status. I mean, to me, Kyler Murray has a chance to, become an Arizona Cardinal for a long time with a great season this year.
Yeah. We'll see if they can continue to make some incremental progress and where they are. That's a team we're looking 40,000 feet at macro stuff, right? The micro with them. I just don't think outside of the quarterback, there's a ton to dissect from a national standpoint. But will the quarterback show enough to be a part of the long-term solution there under new management? That remains to be seen. Well, one thing we do know is that we will be back next week with another edition of the In the Huddle podcast. Again, you can catch me, Baldy, and our buddy Carl Dukes. Put them up every week talking football. We will continue to break down each division in the NFL. And Baldy, I know here in Baltimore, rookies are reporting July 13th, buddy. It is staggering.
Man, that's like that's funny, Jason. My rookie year in 1982, that was my report date to Dallas was July 13th. But that's back when we played 4 preseason games and we had 6 weeks of training camp. Like that's really early. Really. Oh man. And this East Coast heat that we've had, where it's hitting triple digits. We're 2 weeks away, Jason. 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, I know you will find a body of water or two to cool off in. And I will be heading to the beach myself, so I will probably miss 1 or 2 of these moving forward. But again, we're here every week. You can find us a lot of times broadcasting live right here on Twitter. We've got a YouTube channel. You can subscribe to us on the Odyssey app, on Spotify. We're out there in every format possible. Audio for podcast as well. We appreciate you guys for tuning in and look forward to talking ball with you again next week.